Hey everybody, welcome to our first lecture on the heart. Yeah, the heart, there it is. The heart is the pump for your blood, for your cardiovascular system. Heart is going to generate the high pressure that allows blood to flow and tissues to get perfused, to get blood, in other words. That delivers oxygen, delivers nutrients, takes away wastes, carbon dioxide, cells and tissues and organs, and us stay alive. So, we're going to start with the location of the heart, the coverings, get into its anatomy and its functions. That is what is ahead of us. All right, so the heart, of course, is sitting in that space between the lungs. So here is a lung on the right, here is a lung on the left, and the space between the lungs is the mediastinum. And the heart sits in there. The heart is kind of like an inverted cone shape. Let me do my best drawing of an inverted cone. So it's kind of like an inverted cone. Whoosh, whoosh. There it is. And it's kind of angled off to the left under normal situations. And the point at the bottom left of it is called the apex. So there's the apex of the heart right there. The base is up there at the other end, pointing to the right shoulder. And the heart is actually resting upon this nice muscle right here. Of course, this muscle is the diaphragm. Now, medial to the heart, so here's our heart in this transverse section. Medial to the heart, not medial to the heart, sorry, lateral to the heart are the two lungs. I don't know why that says medial up there. Should say lateral. Let's cross that out. Lateral. 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 Lateral to the heart, what do we find? We find the lungs. We find the lungs. Oh, I know what I was saying. I don't need to cross it out. The heart is medial to the lungs. The heart is anterior to the esophagus, anterior to the vertebrae. The heart is posterior to the sternum. That's what we're doing up there. My bad on that. I need another cup of coffee this morning. Anyway, let's keep going, folks. Now, the heart is covered by this really tough membranous bag that we see here. So we got a cadaver. Here's a lung. Here's lung over here as well. Here's the heart in a bag. You can see the bag. The guy's like pulling it up with his forceps. You can see the bag right there. It's been cut. This bag around the heart is called the fibrous pericardium. Peri means around, cardium means heart. So the fibrous pericardium. It is a collagenous sac. So it's a bag made of collagen. This makes it really, really strong. And its abundance of collagen is why it gets the word fibrous. Now, the fibrous pericardium is going to anchor the heart. It's going to attach it to nearby things, such as the diaphragm, which remember was below it, such as the sternum, which is in front of it, as well as the great vessels, so like the big veins and big arteries that we're going to learn about around the heart. And one of the other functions of the fibrous pericardium is it prevents distension. So like we don't want the heart to overfill with blood. And having this bag around the heart, this bag that's not that stretchy, prevents the heart from overfilling or distending. All right, not only is there a fibrous pericardium, there is also a serous pericardium. This is a pair of slippery layers enclosing the heart. If we look at our heart right here, we got a heart right here. We can nicely see the four chambers of it. 1, 2, 3, 4 chambers to our heart. We can see bits of the fibrous pericardium attaching to the diaphragm. The diaphragm will be down here. We can see the attachment to the great vessels, like to the aorta right there. What we really want to do is we want to zoom in on this wall of the heart right here. And if we zoom in on the wall of the heart, so here is the lumen of that chamber. So the space here is the space here. Here is the wall of the heart here. And here, the purple and black are my two slippery layers. So the purple arrow and the black arrow are my two slippery layers. They make up my serous pericardium. The red arrow is on the fibrous pericardium. Notice how it's thick and it's depicted like very whitish because that represents the collagen. And I can see the fibrous pericardium is attached to this pulmonary trunk here, this big artery here. So these are my two slippery layers that are going to surround my heart. This is the parietal serous pericardium. Think about the word parietal as meaning outer. This is my visceral serous pericardium. Visceral, think about that as meaning inner. There is a space between those two pericardial layers, and that space is called the pericardial cavity, and it is filled with pericardial fluid. And that fluid is serving a lubricative function. So it's lubricating. So as the heart expands and contracts, that movement, we don't want that movement to experience unnecessary friction, and having a lubricant in here helps prevent that. Okay. I think that's it I wanted to say about this. Think so. Double checking my brain. All right. So now let's talk about this heart wall here a bit. The wall of the heart, so here's the lumen, right? Here's the lumen of the heart. Here's the pericardial cavity out here. The wall of the heart has 1, 2, 3 layers. This guy right here, which we just labeled as the visceral serous pericardium, it was my inner slippery membrane. It's also known as my epicardium. It's also considered the outer layer of my heart. Then I got my myocardium. This is the muscular layer of the heart. Myo, the prefix myo means muscle. Then I got my lining here. This is my endocardium. So endocardium within heart, myocardium muscle heart, epicardium on top of, outside of heart. And my epicardium is also known as my visceral serous pericardium. Okay, cool. Let's talk chambers. Your heart's got 4 of them. It's got 2 superior chambers. They are known as the atria, and 2 inferior chambers. They are known as the ventricles. So superior atria, inferior ventricles. The atria are my receiving chambers. So the job of the atria is to receive blood. That's why they're kind of skinny in their wall. The job of the ventricles is to pump blood. That's why they're thicker in the wall, more muscular. Now, why do we have 2 receiving chambers? A right and left atrium. 2 pumping chambers, a right and left ventricle. We have these because, of course, we have 2 varieties of blood. We got deoxygenated blood that's going to be on the right side, and then we got oxygenated blood that's going to be on the left side. So 2 kinds of blood necessitates 2 receiving chambers and 2 pumping chambers. All right, we're going to go through all these chambers in exquisite detail. So let's go ahead and do that. But before we do, let's just look at the path that blood will flow. So if we start in our right atrium, that is a receiving chamber. It receives blood from the systemic circuit. The systemic circuit. Bum, bum, bum. So the body, blood that is the body is kind of like done with, right, is going to come back to the right atrium. Notice it is deoxygenated. That's what my blueness indicates. Into the right atrium. Onto the right ventricle. Pumping chamber that pumps blood out to the lungs. The pathway to and from the lungs is called the pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary meaning lungs. And our deoxygenated blood gets oxygenated in those lungs. And then that oxygenated blood is received by the left atrium, who then passes it on to the left ventricle, another pumping chamber, which pumps blood to our rest of our body, and that is called the systemic circuit. So that is our basic blood flow path. All right, let's talk about the right atrium. There it is, cut open for you to see its interior. It receives what kind of blood? Deoxygenated blood from the systemic circuit. Now, there are three major vessels that empty into the right atrium. There are a lot of super tiny vessels that empty into it that we don't care about, but three major ones. Above the right atrium, of course, we have the superior vena cava, basically taking blood from structures above the heart back to the right atrium. Below the heart, we got the inferior vena cava, basically taking blood from structures below the heart back to the right atrium. The coronary sinus, I see the opening for it. I don't see the actual vein, but I see the opening for it. This is a vessel that is draining the heart wall. So the coronary sinus is draining the heart wall. So the heart wall needs its own blood supply. I think I forgot some letters there. Drain. You know what? I'm going to rewrite that. Draining. Not draining. Draining. There we go. Draining. So the heart wall has its own blood supply. Like the musculature of the heart needs its own blood supply. Arteries feed it, veins drain it. The final vein that drains the heart wall is the coronary sinus. A sinus, by the way, is, I know you're thinking, wait a minute, because you guys are AP1 experts, and you're like, hold on, dude. A sinus is a cavity within a bone in the skull. Yeah, it is, but a sinus, same word, is also used for a kind of wide, thin-walled vein, and that's what the coronary sinus is. All right, so that's how blood gets into the right atrium. Then blood goes down past the tricuspid valve, which is this guy here. Tricuspid means it has three flaps to it. 1, 2, 3. The opening that the valve is like the door, the opening is the doorway, and the opening is called the tricuspid orifice. And that's how we get into the right ventricle. All right, so that's some facts about our lovely right atrium. The left atrium, on the other hand, it gets oxygenated blood. Here it is over here. That oxygenated blood is coming from the pulmonary circuit by way of 4 pulmonary veins. I got 2 right pulmonary veins, or right superior, right inferior. I got a left superior, left inferior pulmonary vein, all of them delivering oxygenated blood back to that left atrium. Then that blood flows down through the mitral orifice, past the mitral valve, into the left ventricle. And by the way, the mitral is also known as the bicuspid. So you can use mitral valve or bicuspid valve. So tricuspid on the right, bicuspid on the left. Bicuspid because it has 2 flaps to it. All right. Think about a lovely animal. This is a really cute animal I'm going to draw here. Bum, bum, bum. Let's give it some legs. Give it some legs. Gosh, I'm a good artist with this, aren't I? Like, are you looking at this and be like, that dude can seriously draw with his mouse? All right, this animal I just drew. Really good drawing, isn't it? This animal I just drew is actually, it's called a lamb rat. Lamb rat. See, it's like rat tail, it's rat face, but it's got like that lamb coat to it. Lamb rat is a nice mnemonic device. left atrium, mitral or bicuspid, right atrium, tricuspid. Okay, left atrium, mitral or bicuspid, right atrium, tricuspid. All right, I can draw you that picture if you want one. I'll give you one. I'll sign it for free. Okay. There is a wall, and it's kind of hard to see, but the wall is like right here-ish, between the two atria. And that wall is called the interatrial septum. Septum means wall. Wall between the atria. And it separates the right atrium and the left. And that prevents our deoxygenated blood on the right from mixing with our oxygenated blood on the left. Okay, cool. Now, in that septum, there is actually a distinction to be made if we compare the adult versus the fetus. The adult interatrial septum has a dent in it. And the dent is actually on both sides. We're just looking at it on the right side here. This dent is called the fossa. I know you remember that word because we saw it with bones. A fossa is like a depression or a dent, and it's kind of roundish, so it's called the fossa ovalis. This fossa ovalis is a remnant. It's a vestige of a hole that was in the fetal heart. So the fetal heart actually has a hole between the two atria that we see right here. And this hole is called the foramen ovale. And I know you remember the word foramen from bones too, because a foramen was a hole in a bone, like the foramen magnum. All right, why does the fetus need a hole in its atria? That's a question we need to answer. So here's the deal. In the fetus, the foramen ovale, which I see pictured in this heart, I see it, let's use yellow. I see the foramen ovale right here. The foramen ovale lets blood go directly from the right atrium across to the left in the fetal heart. Now, blood will flow this way because fetal right atrial blood pressure is higher than left atrial blood pressure. Blood always flows from high to low pressure, of course. And what this does, this is the important thing, this bypasses the pulmonary circuit. So most of the blood that comes into the right atrium, not 100% of it, but most of it goes through the foramen ovale, thereby skipping the right ventricle and skipping the pulmonary circuit, in other words, skipping the lungs. And what this is doing is it is preventing the high pressure blood from traveling through those delicate and developing lungs where no gas exchange occurs. So remember, we're talking about the fetus here. All the gas exchange for the fetus is happening between fetal blood and mom's blood at this organ right here. Anybody know what this is? It is a placenta. Now, here's our foramen ovale. We see it right here. Blood cannot actually go backwards because there's a valve here that prevents it. And when the baby is born and it starts to breathe, all of a sudden, this pressure situation flip-flops, and now blood is going to push against this valve, like just push right here. And because the pressure situation has changed, it's higher over here, lower over here, this valve stays shut, and within a couple days, new tissue has grown over it, and where you once had a hole, you now just have a dent, and that dent is called the fossa ovalis. The hole was called the foramen ovale. All right, good stuff, good stuff. Whoopsie. I don't know what just happened there. All right, we are back. Sorry for the little technical difficulty right there. But we're done with the atria, for now at least. We're done with the foramen ovale and the fossa ovalis. Let's talk about those ventricles, the inferior chambers. Like this is a right ventricle right here. And then this over here is the left ventricle. So two ventricles, they are much more muscular because they are the pumps. And my two ventricles are separated by a septum, an interventricular septum, that is the wall between the ventricles. Now the ventricles contain these muscular ridges here. These muscular ridges are called trabeculae carnii. Trabeculae means ridges, carnii means meat, flesh. Okay, let us discuss the right and the left ventricle a bit. The right ventricle gets blood from the right atrium. We're on the right side, so the blood is deoxygenated. The right ventricle pumps blood to the pulmonary circuit, and it starts with this artery right here, this kind of short artery. This is the pulmonary trunk. Now, at the base of that pulmonary trunk, there is a valve called the pulmonary semilunar valve. This pulmonary semilunar valve, what it does is it stops blood in the pulmonary trunk from going backwards into the right ventricle. It prevents backflow from the right ventricle to the pulmonary trunk. We met the tricuspid valve a moment ago. The tricuspid valve prevents backflow from the right ventricle to the right atrium. So there's a valve at the entrance to the right ventricle and a valve at the exit. They both prevent backflow, but of course, we gotta know from where to where. All right. Now my left ventricle receives oxygenated blood from my left atrium. My left ventricle is going to pump blood to the systemic circuit via the aorta. Here is the aorta. This guy up here is the aorta. We'll name his different parts later. At the base of the aorta is an aortic semilunar valve, preventing backflow into the left ventricle from the aorta. Meanwhile, the mitral or bicuspid valve, which is over here, prevents backflow from the left ventricle into the left atrium. So those are my two ventricles and some basic things about them. Let's talk about an important fact. My left and my right ventricle, they pump the same amount of blood. All right? On average, they pump the same amount of blood. All right? But you might say, well, wait a minute. The left is so much bigger than the right. I mean, and look at it. Look how thick the myocardium is in the left versus in the right. So the left ventricle has to pump blood with greater pressure. Because think about it. The left ventricle is pumping blood to the entire body. Top of the head, tips of your fingers, tips of your toes. That's a lot farther than where the right ventricle has to pump blood to. The right just pumps blood to the lungs. And where are they? They're right next to the heart. So the left ventricle pumps blood farther with more pressure. So it needs more muscle. So they're pumping the same volume, but difference in pressure and therefore muscle and thickness. If I look at some of the pressures involved, like the pressure generated in my left ventricle when it contracts, it might be around 130 millimeters of mercury. and about 10 when it's relaxing. Whereas the right ventricle is only developing, less than a fifth of that, 25 millimeters of mercury when it's relaxed, and about 5, when it's contracted, and about 5 when it's relaxed. So drastic difference in the necessary pressures. So the left ventricle, even though it's pumping the same volume, needs a lot more muscle. All right, quick question here. In a normal heart, the amount of blood entering the pulmonary trunk every 5 minutes is blank the amount of blood entering the aorta every 5 minutes. Tell me your answer next time you see me. Like after you've watched this video, come see me and tell me your answer. All right. Okay. We got to discuss the circuit of blood that feeds the heart. The heart, of course, is a hard-working organ. The heart needs its own blood supply. That blood supply is called the coronary circuit. It is a branch of our systemic circuit, which remember was going to the whole body. Well, that includes the heart. So the systemic circuit includes the coronary circuit. Coronary circuit provides blood to the heart wall. This is showing me all my non-microscopic blood vessels in my coronary circuit. All 3 of my layers, endo, myo, and epicardium, need oxygen and nutrients to be delivered, need CO2 and waste to be removed. The myocardium, though, is the thickest and the hardest working of the 3 of them. It's going to have the most branches of this coronary circuit. So, if we go back to our left ventricle, which we know is the pump for the systemic circuit, the left ventricle is moving blood into the aorta, which is our first big artery of the systemic circuit. And then almost immediately branching off the aorta is the beginnings of the coronary circuit. There's a right coronary artery on the right, a left coronary artery on the left. The right coronary artery gives off branches. 2 important ones are the posterior interventricular artery, which goes down the back in the middle of the ventricles, and the marginal artery, which is on the right side. 2 important branches of the left coronary artery are the anterior interventricular artery, which goes down the front in between the ventricles, and the circumflex artery, which is on the left side. And of course, there's lots of other coronary arteries. And then there's smaller and smaller branches of these guys. Then eventually we reach coronary capillaries in the 3 layers, tiny blood vessels where exchange occurs. They give rise to small coronary veins and bigger coronary veins until we get 3 sizable coronary veins: the great cardiac vein, the middle cardiac vein, and the small cardiac vein. And those 3 empty into the vessel we mentioned like 10 minutes ago or whatever, called the coronary sinus, and the coronary sinus empties back into the right atrium. So this is the basic blood flow through our coronary circuit. Write this out, draw this out. If we look at a picture, and you know what? I just want to go back for a second here. Do I have a good front heart picture? Do I? Well, no, I don't. All right, never mind. You can tell this is always like, I'm just giving my lecture here. Don't really have like a script. Just kind of doing my thing. I'm going to skip this one. Because we're going to do, the reason I skipped that one is we're going to do those arteries and veins in lab. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to skip it. And you know what, this is actually a perfect point to take a break. We're half hour in. I'm going to quit here because heart valves will take us a little bit of time. We'll do heart valves and we'll do more stuff. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.